The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of what I am forever. What's happening? Benton here, Sunday morning. Coming up on 5 a.m. Pacific, live from Los Angeles. Wrestling with the YouTube client for live streaming. It's got bugs, it's got problems. Imagine. Alphabet Google YouTube's hell pit? You don't say. Believe that. Well, we have some notes. Old Benton here, wide awake at 1 a.m., writing down dictionary definitions after being inspired by the stream of the title that I've written down. So imagine going to sleep at 8 p.m., then awakening at 1 a.m., not wanting to dig out notebooks and pens, trusting, right? Here's the surrender, trusting through the yin form of energy, the passive, the submissive, the feminine, chaos also, lest we forget. Saying, well, trusting that I would be able to go back to sleep, which I was, thankfully. A good night's sleep, very important, and I know probably not right now, but you know, there is a bit of a thing called the up all night crew. And back in the hotel live streaming days, when I would go live, I don't know, what was that, around 2 a.m.? Actually, sometimes earlier, the walk and talk portions of the live streams. Yeah, like 1 a.m., 2 a.m. Central. That was, Benton had been to sleep, but up all night crew was mostly in the house. Sunday morning, I would suspect to be slow, and that's all right. Shout out to the chat. Shout out to the replay crew. Usually the chat is subscribers only. However, with not being able to schedule the live stream ahead of time, if I go and make changes to the chat as a moderator, then there will be messages on my screen that won't go away until people chat. And I don't really want to look at those. Funny how this technology, you know, it's an AI robotic takeover, supposedly Skynet. You know, we have been assimilated. The royal we have been assimilated, but the fucking YouTube app doesn't work for live streaming. But StreamYard is $45 and it works. It does the things that YouTube's app doesn't do. Interesting. Funny how that works. But let's not complain. But yes, the things that could be done now, right? Such as waking up at 1 a.m. and dragging notebooks out of backpacks and figuring out where the pens are. The things that could be done now. And how many of those things could be done now? And how many of the things that could be done now would be in service of the individual internally towards their power, if they are what I am, one with the most super intelligent power and force of love and creation possible at the highest levels of vibrational frequency. No possibility of meaning or power within this delusory, the vacuous delusory adversarial realm of business transactions, meaning outside of my own internal space, which only exists seemingly based on waking dreams, surrealistic notions of unreality involved with time, space, location, place, having to do with the impossibility of individuating an indivisible, supreme a force supremely authoritative, creation itself, ever expanding, always giving birth to something new, uh, having no beginning and no end. Right. Well, let's break off a chunk of that via delusion, also known as this place, and have some sort of have some kind of pseudo experience of death, and then call it life. That's a breakfast cereal. Mikey likes it. On behalf of antithesis, that which makes an enemy of what I am. And then here's my nature as Jack from Jack and the Beanstalk, bebopping around town after being entrusted with the so-called wealth of the family, who needs him to go out and they need him to go out and define himself based on the vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions. And is this, in fact, some process of sacrificing him to Moloch? Meanwhile, Jack from Jack and the Beanstalk, unable to do anything other than 100% correctly identify within himself and walking the perfected path that lies within, having no concept or lacking the ability to understand the warnings of his family and the villagers that, hey man, you better be careful. Catastrophe and calamity potentially lies around every corner. Okay. Meanwhile, what I am lacks the ability or capability to even fear anything whatsoever. Certainly not this bullshit realm, right? But I don't know. Might as well have an experience of death, death warmed over, animated death. Why not? And then call it life, because what else would antithesis call this? This death, illusory world. But yes, pretty pleased with sugar on top. Can I form an image in relation to this place, and then uphold it before Moloch via social media and other means, and status quo, social contract, and conformity to peer groups, uphold that image before Moloch and get the attaboys and the pats on the head, and you done good, little Benton. Mikey likes it. Mikey loves that corporate slavery because we taught him to. We meaning the realm. They taught him to. And if you look at my community or posts tab, we see yet another example of anybody who seems to be thriving economically and getting ahead, air quotes these days, is doing so through illegal, fraudulent, unethical, and or illegal means. Right. I believe that was, I haven't watched that video yet, the tale of a, it says superintendent, so I'm going to assume superintendent of a college or a school district. Probably a public school district at $250,000 a year with a fake doctorate and a fake green card or a fake work visa or a fake citizenship, thus proving the nature of citizenship, dead, proving the nature of a green card, dead, or a work authorization, dead, illegitimate, no life, no validity, fraudulent. Oh my goodness, they're frauding and defrauding the fraudulent system. And in acknowledgement of Christ in the Bible talking about, well, if hate drives out hate, then Satan's kingdom is divided against itself, and how could it stand? So, if fraud can do anything other than thrive, right? If people are unable to thrive in an economic system that the function of which is to make rich people richer every new moment into perpetuity, by making poor people poorer every new moment into perpetuity, and it never fails to achieve its purpose. Well, wouldn't that system have to reward fraud? Because if fraud can drive out fraud, then Satan's kingdom is divided against itself and cannot stand. Or antithesis, or death, or this system of things. And that is not necessarily the plight of the human. It's the plight of the human who is psychologically identified that these mechanisms have any authority or validity whatsoever. Yes, in service of death, destruction, depravity, struggle, strife, torture, right? Stress, anxiety, fear, guilt, shame, ridicule, mockery. Yeah, very valid from that perspective. The inverse of what I am. And then the reconciliation of all that, that is the walking of the perfected path within, to uncover that perfected path within, and then to walk it in some ways involves the yin form of the yang and the yin, to spiritually surrender oneself to these realities while constantly being pressured by one's own psychology, the status quo, social contracts, and peer groups to, hey, you better go out here and produce for this society, for diminishing rewards, for ever diminishing amounts of money to live on as a slave, because, hey, you got to feed your family. You got to put food on the table. Well, I have been here, hasn't worked in over 6 months. I've eaten every day. What are you talking about? Is that the standard to sustain the death, right? A process of death sustenance, or sustaining, the animated death warmed over physical body, which is also dead, because anything that traces its origins to this place is dead. That's its nature. And what I am, that creative force, the subversion of it, actually seemingly gives life to these things. They say, oh, he's calling himself God again. That's what you say. It's what you say. Is that Joe Moore? What's happening? It's a different greeting than we're used to. Maybe could be a fake Joe Moore. That's right. Saw that on Autism Rich on the thumbnail. That was in the bathroom. The second set of bathrooms after the first set was the first bathroom building was filled with people using it, or homeless people living in the bathrooms overnight. Either way. And the second building, the first door I pulled opened up, and I was able to have my morning constitutional. What a blessing! And yes, that someone had presumably stenciled that on the wall. Doesn't look freehand to me. And I might get into some autism talk, because I had a back and forth in the comments before I turned them off. Actually, they're all being held after the multitudinous spiritual attacks directed at yours truly within my own comment section. How rude. But where Kim before the storm is having trouble accepting Benton's undiagnosed fake autism through a lack, his inability to reconcile such. Now, and this is also says something about the personal development of the individual, and the autism itself kicks in. The undiagnosed fake autism kicked in, and it's about 6 p.m. yesterday that I saw his final comment. Something about basically a rejection that it's basically, he doesn't want to believe that Benton could possibly have lived a life of autism. How could that be possible? And because there's people in the so-called truth community like Hank and some other person called Duck, although I don't know who that is or what that's supposed to mean. Unfamiliar, but meanwhile, the slogans of autism is if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism, and also autism speaks. Although many are nonverbal, lest we forget. And then realizing the psychological mechanisms around, at 6 p.m. with an 8 p.m. bedtime, am I really going to put a lot of effort and energy into, reading through the list of autism symptoms? And, what is the use of that? Right. And then, here would be my question is, can a person with autism be placed under MK Ultra mind control? Right. And what would happen if nobody knew a person had autism, and then from a young age they were MK Ultra'd into performing as a what would the term be? Evangelist? Not quite, but a whatever you would call the activities of the Jehovah's Witnesses. I never joined. Please don't call me a Jehovah's Witness. But the parents had me off knocking on doors and talking to strangers and giving Bible talks, dressed in my Sunday best, carrying a book bag from a very young age. And my gigantic, scary father was constantly forcing me to make eye contact. Probably, the Southern, it was not just Southern, but a particular cultural context of, look a man in the eye and give him a firm handshake type shit. And then my father's responsibility to make me into a man starting at about age 6 or so, 6, 7, 8. Mikey likes it. Right. So, yeah. So I don't know. Have we factored for all of that, Kim before the storm? But not that it matters, because, what's Kim doing in that scenario? Well, he's using a strategy of negation to try to find any reason to negate Benton's assertion, to not have to continue considering it carefully and intelligently. So instead of collaboration and consideration and empathy and tolerance and acceptance and, dare I say, love, no, it's a self-serving strategy of what mechanisms inside of Kim's mind need to fire off that he can plausibly type some words into a YouTube chat and, and seek to negate, entire layers of Benton's own, psychology and performance and experiences, special abilities, lest we forget. Wasn't that the plot of the movie Rain Man? Before the general public even really knew what autism was? Wasn't that sort of part of the thing there? Tom Cruise realizing that he had this brother with these talents and abilities. But part of that was, I guess, Tom Cruise's own guilt and shame, and probably his own need to status quo social contract and conform to peer groups, right? Oh, hey, you think you want to pass, and I don't remember the movie that well, but I'm guessing and speculating Tom Cruise's character. Oh, really, buddy? You're really loving, accepting, and tolerant? Well, what about the fact that you have this estranged brother, with this affliction? Maybe go do something for him. Maybe he could maybe he would actually like to see his brother, right? And, maybe Benton would like to have friends in a way in his advanced age. Meanwhile, autistic as fuck, weird Benton, bowling alone in 1996 in Fayetteville, Arkansas, with 100 personal friends and very popular and socially successful. Well, we can't accept that maybe an autistic person could be socially acceptable. Well, maybe people back then were a little more willing to And for their own purposes, not having a smartphone, not having the internet, they were sort of dependent upon, a different set of dynamics, right? A different set of dynamics. And Benton had been weaponized by a mind control cult to be very, very extroverted. And now we get into the splitting of the psyche and the satanic ritual abuse of, let's take a person who's very introverted and monastic and hermit-like and transform him into a person who seems to be very extroverted. Interesting. And the damage done thereby, right? But now it's 2025, and for Kim, and this is not a critique of Kim, this is having to go with the ideas, to critique these ways of thinking and these incorrect and erroneous approaches to a problem, right? Instead of exercising a proper strategy, of the moment the individual recognizes that a particular strategy can never prove effective, take out the metaphorical X-acto knife and excise it. Get rid of it, get shed of it. The moment that a particular strategy cannot bear fruit, but the individual who does not understand their own motivations, the motivation to think just long enough to be able to plausibly stop thinking, and then, oh, well, let's go find a Benton and accuse him of overthinking. And Benton says, well, would you ever accuse somebody of feeling too much? Well, of course not. Okay, it's the same thing. You're telling me this thing I'm really good at, that I'm doing too much of it. But your emotional types, you'll never suggest to them that they feel too much and that it's a problem. Not for them, it's a problem for other people. Because remember, it's a performance of love, tolerance, and acceptance to uphold status quo social contract within conformity to peer groups. We can't be seen to not accept the emotion, right? But then the emotion of annoyance, irritability, and what else comes along with Benton's so-called, air quotes, overthinking. Meanwhile, if the consensus of the general public is to think just long enough to be able to turn their brains off, and Benton almost always thinks beyond that point strategically, that doesn't validate, that's ignorance. If what I'm doing is representative of truth, then how can the ignorance of thinking just long enough to be able to go back to efficiency, aka laziness, and not do what could be done now? See, what could be done now is to advance one's thinking. That can be done right motherfucking now. Use your head for more than a hat rack. Supposedly everybody has a brain in their skull, the mind, the Kybalion claiming, while on the one hand all truths are merely half-truths, but then here that all is mind, right? So if the being wishes to wield and access power in a realm that only understands on some level power, right, and money, but that is power to some extent, and that's all it knows. And is it possible, as the being is treated like a slave, and I do have this in my notes, as the being is treated like a slave, a corporate slave in a corporate hellscape, is it possible to just be, for a consciousness and free will and all of these things that apparently exist, but to be completely disempowered, meaning to lack the ability to access power? Is that possible? I would say no. But what is the power that's accessible? It's what's within the individual. Part of that would be the mind, the thought process, see, the leveling up, right? The get on my level, see, which isn't my level. It's the balls and the gumption and the grit and the come what may, that yes, I will utilize these talents and resources. See? And so let me ask you a question, Mr. Kim before the storm. If Benton is so observably talented, disciplined, and hardworking within various contexts, how is it possible in a so-called meritocracy that at the age of 50, he's never, quote, made it within this system of things at a level of what this realm considers to be success, which is money? And can we go ahead and accept that by age 50, if it hasn't happened now, it's not going to happen? See, if that idea isn't reconciled, it's most likely because the being did not even bother to think long enough to consider it in other words, to do what could be done now and interrogate their own assertion before they give it to me. But Benton alchemized it yesterday by observing his sensitive internal space through the recent leveling up. Again, hashtag cheer the level up. And said, well, okay, I'll just observe that, yes, this does. I do feel and perceive I feel and perceive that this could annoy me and frustrate me if I allow it to, but the only way out is through. Now to sit there with the annoyance and the irritation and accept it in a spiritual surrender for what it is. See? Not to flee from it, because that's a lack of trust, Kim. And this is what we saw with some of my early conversations, where I would be saying a sentence, but the sentence would be two phrases, and I would be saying it to Kim, and he would always start talking at the comma because he heard the setup and he did not trust what was about to follow. See, probably some of that is being around a bunch of dumbos and Kim's own intelligence through pattern recognition, in most scenarios knowing what to expect from these people's behavior. And then hearing the first half of my sentence while I'm trying to get a paragraph out, and I can't get a sentence out because he must begin talking after when I get to the comma of the first sentence, because he doesn't trust. And thank you for inadvertently teaching me something, because I pondered on this. I said, why does he keep doing this? I asked myself, right? And the Holy Ghost, the Comforter, which is the Holy Ghost and is teaching me all things and bringing unto my remembrance, eventually said, well, it's a lack of trust. And then later on, correct philosophy is, well, not later on, but correct philosophy being the absence of incorrect philosophy. Then here comes, no spiritual surrender equals no spiritual victory. It's to surrender oneself to the fact that if the being is what I am, there's no ability or capacity to fear what comes after the comma of a sentence, right? That pause, and then, oh my God, I can't trust what's coming next. I am Kim before the storm. I must start talking. And then stymie and frustrate, and then be confused as to why is now Benton talking over everybody and hooping and hollering. And a lesser evolved form of Benton. Why? Well, now why is this happening? And then something he's good at, let's go ahead and bash each other's skulls in, but instead of in the physical, which I wouldn't be interested in any way, my mind is my weapon. Now it's the panel verse and it's the internet, and let's do it, in a jockeying for position male hierarchy online, where in the physical we would be able to establish a hierarchy. Right. And lest we forget, the leaders of men in a tribe of men, that's not typically the largest, strongest, baddest ass warrior necessarily. Although, if we bring this to something that Kim might understand in some cultural context, the Hells Angels under Sonny Barger, he certainly would not have been the most physically capable, but he still had to be able to fight whoever would challenge his leadership. Right. So he can't be a pussy. Got to have some testosterone, got to have some substance to him. But this idea that you're never going to be able to defeat the other tribes and bands of warriors if the particular If the home team insists on we got to have the biggest and the baddest as the leader, that doesn't work. Probably going to need a tactician and a strategist at the minimum. Right now, if the biggest and the baddest is able to gain the respect of the tactician and the lone wolf and the person who will just would rather be alone anyway on the edge of the camp, right? And might not want to be the leader. And then the trust is there, Kim. See, the trust is there where Kim can say, okay, well, what about this situation? Read the battlefield for me. Well, is Kim going to be able to trust that I'm giving him the correct information, or am I shining him on and I'm setting him up to fail? Would Kim ever be able to trust that? See? And that's why a lot of these male hierarchies exist, this jockeying for position. And that's why males or men very quickly establish that pecking order, very quickly, right? But then also the cultural dynamics of someone from Southern California, because of how I talk and how I present myself as a Southerner, I can't ever be, I can't be equal. I can't ever be fully accepted. I have to be a moron and a bozo on some level from these people's perspective because of how I talk. Because if he wasn't, a simpleton, why is he talking that way? See, why are his speech patterns like this? And Theo Vaughn, the comedian, seems to be going through his own version of this. It's like, well, I don't know, man. If I grew up in Southern California, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't speak this way. And then it's also this, I think it's a fantasy that it's also a superiority in that they probably secretly believe that if they came from bumfuck Arkansas, born into a time warp, that, well, they would speak correctly. They would be better than the local fucking yokels. They would grow up in a backdrop of a Billy Bob Thornton Sling Blade movie. I like the way you talk, but they wouldn't talk that way. Okay, sure you wouldn't. Sure you wouldn't. While eating a diet of fried chicken, and just the most horrific diet possible because of the Pepsi generation and, all of these Franken foods and highly processed, super high processed, whatever they call them. I forget there's a term for this. And, what is now the most obese region of the country? Where I'm from, of course. What's one of the healthiest? Where Kim's from, right? What area of the country has the highest use of psychedelics? The West Coast. What area of the country has the lowest use of psychedelics? The Deep South. So see these inversions, right? And how is Benton able to operate within the context of the culture that Kim comes from, but Kim seemingly lacks the ability to view Benton through the proper cultural lens, filter, or context? And this is intelligence, or lack thereof, right? Now, did Benton figure out his own undiagnosed fake autistic abilities at a young age, and did he weaponize them for his own benefit, such as, here's one thing that's associated with autism is narrowly focused interests that are pursued obsessively, in Benton's case, reading, in conjunction with he was born with it, photographic memory as a young person, and an inborn genius level ability to skim written material, meaning when I look at a page of text, my mind immediately takes a picture of the entire page, and then somehow my brain just erases everything that's not pertaining, and then all that's left in my mind is the relevant information. Now, when reading for pleasure in fiction, this was not typically utilized. Meanwhile, if somebody takes one of these bullshit autism quizzes, it will ask you, hey, when you're reading fiction, can you easily picture the characters? No, I never have been able to. In fact, I'm generally lost if I read a story or a news article to this day. I don't know what the fuck they're talking about when they're addressing these various people. If I listen to somebody tell me a story that involves multiple people, I don't even attempt to figure out who's who, because I don't know what the fuck they're talking about. And I learned long ago not to put my energy into trying to track that, because it doesn't work for me. See? And that's a deficit associated with undiagnosed fake autism, or just fake autism. Another one is selective or picky eating. And to this day, I have yet to encounter another human being who is as picky of an eater as I was as a child, but we'll just negate that. See, Kim, because he's operating from he's already made his mind up, he'll just negate that and say, well, yeah, but a lot of kids are picky. You didn't hear me. I'm accounting for picky eaters. I said I've never met another person who was as picky as I was as a child, meaning I outdid the other picky eaters. Right. And in fact, it's probably the reason I'm not a gigantic, scary person like Kim is because I was not able to eat proper nutrition as a child because of my own pickiness. And was that something that the system intentionally did to me? You know, I don't know. Maybe they MK Ultra'd my ass into not being. So maybe I'm not autistic. Maybe it's just they mind controlled me into doing things that expresses autism. Maybe the photographic memory and all of these abilities in reading that I used to have and still have to some extent, maybe that came from the mind control. I don't fucking know. Who knows? I know it made it very easy to get through school. But then also, while sitting in class, I had no ability to understand what the fuck the teacher was talking about. Don't know, no idea what she's saying, or he. So I would sit there and read a book because I read the chapter. I already memorized the chapter and understand it well enough that when the quiz or the test is passed out, I'm finna make 100. And then when they passed out the syllabus, when school started, I would do a mathematical calculation and say, well, okay, I don't have to do any homework and I'll still pass this class because I know I will make 100 on all of the tests and quizzes. I don't know, am I just a fucking genius? Meanwhile, they put me in gifted and talented education for a week, and then they gave us an IQ test, and then thankfully they put me back with the regular kid where I belong. Because Benton ain't no genius on those levels, right? But again, if I'm really so fucking talented and disciplined and hardworking and focused, how have I never made a success of myself? Because remember, I tried. See, you can't have it both ways, Padna. I won't let the person have it both ways. Kim can't have it both ways. It has to be one or the other, right? Or does the social awkwardness, the inability to pick up on social cues, right? Let's not forget that in my early years, I could not decode song lyrics, meaning I was a big fan of music and pop music and all of these things as a youth, you know, before adolescence, and did not know the word, could not decipher the words being sang. Right. At a certain point, realized that I didn't know what people's facial expressions meant. And I had vivid memories. And here's another thing in the symptoms of autism is, or these autism quizzes, is to when excited by an interest, does the person tend to just keep talking even though the person listening is not getting in a word edgewise, and you know, furthermore, probably is giving body language and facial cues that they would like to leave now. I have memories as a young person of doing that to people and not understanding what their body language and their facial cues meant, and then later on taught myself what the facial cues and the body language meant, and now I have memories where it was like, oh wow, I really did just talk at that person for 20 fucking minutes and they weren't able to escape because it was a 6-year-old child or 8-year-old child excitedly, just talking and talking and talking and talking and talking, because the child won't stop fucking reading and memorizing things. Before the internet and before Google, when somebody would have had to go to the motherfucking library to debunk whatever information I was giving them. Some version of that Jerry Maguire, and the little cute little kid is like, do you know the human head weighs 8 pounds, or whatever the fuck he was always on about. I mean, what even is this? Just, that's another thing in the autism quizzes, just chock full of fucking trivialities that even I don't really give a fuck about. What's all this information gathering? And then now, because of the internet, people think that they did that. Y'all didn't do that when y'all was 10 years old. None of you did that effectively. Y'all wasn't out here obsessively taking in as much information as humanly possible when you were 10, about the time I started reading the motherfucking newspaper every day. Every day, a 10-year-old boy who was popular at school, socially successful, eventually good at basketball, and somewhat good at skateboarding, right? And the girls liked him to some extent, was reading the newspaper like he was an old man. Where's my paper? Like, what is this? But Benton can't possibly have autism. What? Because his daddy fucking sat on my chest until I trained myself to look people in the eye, and now for years now I've been untraining myself to look everybody in the eye, and I've even had people, especially as a homeless person, just say, "Hey, buddy, you're staring at me." It's like, sorry, man, didn't realize I was staring at you, because I'm waiting my turn to talk to somebody about some homeless resource I'm trying to get a bed for the night in Portland, because I got a job, and as a grown ass man, I gotta have somebody's got to sign a goddamn note for me, or I'm back to sleeping on the sidewalk to go to work. And meanwhile, eventually it just became too onerous to try to get the piece of paper signed and be able to work the job. So I said, fuck it, I guess we'll just sleep on the motherfucking sidewalk. And you're going to tell me it's that version of Daniel Day-Lewis in There Will Be Blood, down in that dragging himself back to town after breaking his leg, that you're going to tell me that I couldn't have been successful? See, there has to be a reason for this. And I mean successful based on money. What are the reasons? Again, reconciliation. Where is the reconciliation? And Kim will never hear this probably, but where is the reconciliation? See, why don't people understand strategically that these things must be reconciled in order for the individual to properly think for themselves? There is no proper thinking for oneself without forcing oneself to reconcile various phenomena, whether they want to or not. See? And why is the individual dependent on emotional states where they need to be appealed to do the thinking? Well, that's because the individual doesn't understand that they've been sacrificed to Moloch and industrial and post-industrial society, and that Don Draper's Mad Men version of Madison Avenue advertising is so ingrained in everybody that how they feel about any little scenario is first and foremost, because they've been catered to their whole life. See, they've been catered to at the level of Don Draper saying, more or less advertising is involved in whatever the individual is doing in any given moment, making sure that they feel safe and secure and trust that whatever they're doing is absolutely 100% appropriate. But it's done so that they will purchase specific products and services. And whether it's lighting up a cigarette, right, to celebrate the just completed meal, or like anyway, I won't even get into it, but it doesn't matter. I've had some experiences with ex-wife number 2 who was a smoker. Never again, no more smokers. No more smokers. Well, no more anybody, probably, thankfully. And how can Benton see this more clearly? And the individuals can't see it at all within themselves, but then because they can't observe their internal space, and this is what the Bible means, remove the large obstruction from your eye, and then maybe you can see clearly enough to help Benton remove the small speck out of his eye. Right. But when the being understands that they are unable to go within themselves, and Kim has grown and changed and evolved. I'm not putting him down on that level, but don't stop, sir. Keep going. Keep going. But again, what does Kim get out of seeking to convince Benton that, well, Benton probably isn't undiagnosed fake autistic? I don't know. How did Benton teach himself to play percussion? By listening to the radio, keeping time in his head, turning the volume all the way down, continuing to keep time in his head, then turning the music back on, and then being able to tell, okay, did I stay on the beat or did I deviate from the beat? And if so, to what extent? Because I was in the band in school and it ran out of percussion. And I said, well, fuck it. I guess I'll play percussion. They need to volunteer. Somebody's got to play the goddamn bass drum. And then, okay, learn that for marching band. Okay, now we're going to play the snare drum. Right. And I probably taught somebody else how to play the fucking bass drum. Nobody taught me how to play the bass drum. We had a band director that was about to retire, and he didn't give a fuck. Oh, okay, Benton, you want to teach yourself to play the bass drum? Go for it. You want to teach somebody else? Oh, you want to teach yourself snare drum and then teach somebody else bass drum? He didn't care. Just all he cared about is there's somebody who can play the motherfucking drums, so he can do his last 2 years and retire. Right? Who cares? It's called special abilities. It's called Benton sitting in the Walmart, in a Walmart somewhere as a homeless person, just sitting in the lobby, probably resting, the little atrium area, whatever that is. And one of those stupid games, the claw hook games, well, it has this musical pattern, and I'm not even really paying attention to it. And then it catches my attention and I realize, oh, I've already memorized this pattern. And I just sit there for the next 10 minutes and amuse myself because it's like 5 minutes of silence or whatever, or it's like 180 seconds of silence. And then the fucking pattern kicks in, and with 100% accuracy, I can sit there and do the pattern. Like, what the fuck is that? Through the silence. And it became a meme at a certain time. There was a rap song, and the song ends, and then there's a long period of silence, and Nate Dogg goes, "Smoke weed every day." And as long as I really focus and don't get distracted, I can nail that motherfucker every time. Like, what is that? That's not undiagnosed fake autism? Did I practice? Did I spend a bunch of my life learning how to do that? As if I'm on a unicycle fucking juggling flaming chainsaws? Which I know is a bit of that's just trying to be funny. But yeah, like what are we talking about? Taught myself to ride a bicycle at age 2 or 3? I don't know. What is that? But then, a lot of people's idea of an autistic person is they're dorks, they're unsuccessful, they can't be decent at sports, girls don't like them. No, that's not true. There's absolutely autistic guys who do quite well with women. Some of which is that they are so focused on whatever their particular interest is, that they're not really paying her any attention. And surprise, surprise, a lot of girls respond very powerfully to the guy who pays them no mind whatsoever. Isn't that fascinating how that works? And so can the being operate within these various dynamics through a process of self-development? Again, the things that could be done now. Anybody can start doing that right motherfucking now. Say, oh, well, yeah, I have a brain in my head. I have mental energies. I have a desire to grow and change and evolve into something greater than, the current level of performance. Why not? Right? Why not? And so, in elementary school, when they passed out the little bookmarks for the reading program, and then the teacher might say, if you read one of these books, You know, basically, we want you to just choose one of these books and read it if that's okay with you. But then maybe it was bonus. Maybe you got extra credit at a certain point. Well, I read every book every time. I read every book every time. Why wouldn't I? So you look at Hunter S. Thompson. Oh, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. I read all of his books. Oh, Douglas Adams, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I read all of the Douglas Adams books. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, Chronicles of Narnia. I read all of them. Like, why wouldn't I? And it wasn't to show off. It's because I like to read. Oh, but it's Revenge of the Nerds, and you can't have a person who's, arguably attractive, who, some of the girls like him, and he's, not a jock, but he's made himself into, by the way, made himself into a good basketball player. As an undersized person, made himself into a good basketball player. See? I don't know. Does this not sound like, how does this not sound like autism? I'm confused. But it's in my genetics to have above average coordination and hand-eye coordination and, footwork and, slightly above average athletic ability. It's in my genetics because of my bloodline, right? And they won't shut the fuck up about the size of Michael Jordan's hands. Well, I'm 5'10", and generally was the smallest when I was more like 5'8" when I played playground basketball, 130 pounds, and I could palm a basketball. And how many people on the court could palm a basketball? Not many. Whether they were taller than me or not, I don't know what the fuck that is. You tell me. I don't know. It's genetics. Never really questioned it, honestly. And then now you got Gen Z thinking that they want to go back to 1986 because the boomers had it made. Do you think any of my bozo friends were doing good with girls back in the day? Not many. Yes, some were. I mean, come on. And then I was looking at I was watching some TV program from 1986 with Jello Biafra. It was some local station in San Francisco, and it was a guy and a girl, news presenters, and the guy was doing his best Donahue impression, and in fact, they hired him because he looked like Phil Donahue, but like a Chad Light version of the Phil Donahue. And I learned from a young age, well, women find Phil Donahue attractive, but men think that Phil Donahue's a bozo, right? Or David Letterman. I figured that out. Oh, a lot of women find David Letterman attractive, but your average man just thinks he's a clown and a bozo. It's like, yeah, that's a clown and bozo that in a California culture is banging people's wives, most likely. Right. But in my culture, we don't do that because it's the most, and people think LA's rough or whatever. It's like, oh yeah, my hometown has double the violent crime rate per capita of Los Angeles. What do I have to worry about? Meanwhile, yeah, that's what kept me from ever messing with anybody's wives or girlfriends is not having to not wanting to have to watch my back. Well, out here in Cali, it's not really a culture of, if there's cheating going on and all of this, probably not. There could be some violence, but it's probably not going to happen, right? And how all of these things tie in together. See. But anyway, they left the TV commercials in. And I'm looking at this going like, this is what Gen Z thinks they can go back to. Meanwhile, they can't imagine being, 10 years old in 1986 and they've never seen or heard of a cell phone. And they don't have access to a computer and they never have. And then maybe their school gets a couple of Apple IICs and they're in one particular classroom and they're only able to use them every once in a while, but only after they can prove to the teacher that they know how to boot the motherfucking operating system off of a 5 1/4-inch disc. So Benton was one of the few kids that even got to use the fucking bullshit computers. Mostly they sat unused, but a few of us knew how to actually operate them and they were basically useless. And we just played around with them. And eventually, by high school, some of the older kids figured out how to make clip art. So we were making memes. And a couple of kids a year older than me were printing out like Cookie Monster with, and they put HWA on top of this black and white representation of Cookie Monster from the clip art, and it stood for Honkies with Attitude. So I was memeing, right, or learning memes in 1990 or whatever that would have been. And then I was on the internet. I've been on the internet every day since '94. Again, what of this doesn't smack of autism? And then one of those guys got drunk in the woods right after graduation, fell off a cliff, and died. It's like, what is that? I don't know. And his nickname was Jigs. Or maybe that was his daddy. I guess he was Jigs Jr. Coming up with the Honkies with Attitude. Right? Oh, but it's Arkansas, so it's got to be racist. I don't know. My hometown back then was 60% black. Now it's like 70%. Pretty sure the racists don't go live with the blacks. Right? And see, people have no frame of reference. People can't see what I am. They have there's no way for them to understand what I am. And what they think I am, it changes. Right now, I'm some representation of, ICE, Donald Trump, MAGA, the oppressive government, privilege. It's like, how can I be privileged? And by 1995, I was reading in my own state newspaper that my county in Arkansas was the most economically depressed county in the country. Right? It's like, what are you talking about? And then, oh, well, the boomers had it made. What do you mean? The economy, so-called, was way worse back then. It heated up, from like 2000 to whenever. Let's just say maybe 95 to 2008. And so, yeah, maybe boomers were a specific age that if they didn't have their head up their ass, that there was an opportunity. Right? What's that have to do with Gen Z? Well, because the system is running a train on their ass and telling them, oh, well, you guys got it bad, but look at these boomers. The boomers ruined it. And that's the exact same thing of the 08-09 crisis, where the system just said, yeah, a bunch of Americans took out loans they couldn't afford. They bought a bunch of houses they couldn't afford. Oh, well, yeah, after the government changed the rules and said we don't need the paperwork to prove your income anymore. Sign on the dotted line, you get to verify your own income. And meanwhile, you had pizza boys, literal pizza boys one day, who then got jobs the next day selling mortgages and cold calling people in New Orleans, and their homes have been in their families for 3 or 4 or 5 generations. And then Alan Greenspan was simultaneously considered this financial wizard. And he was on TV going, hey, Americans would be fools not to take advantage of historically low mortgage rates in the form of an adjustable rate mortgage. The man went on national TV and said it. But then when it all fell apart, because it was all based on the notion that, well, it's not home prices could never fall simultaneously all across the country. That's not possible. Well, of course, that's just like the Titanic. Well, this thing can't sink. Well, of course it sinks. And people say, oh, and I don't need the conspiracy theories. I'm going official fiction, folks. I I understand all the conspiracies, and it was actually 2 of them, and there was 2 ships, and this, that, and the other. Got it. Understood. I'm going official fiction with it. See. But oh yeah, just Gen Z blame the boomers, because the Gen Z the boomers who were temporarily looked like middle class, who now, most of them, not all, some of them do still have some retirement and some pensions, but the majority of boomers are living in poverty, folks. I don't know if y'all are aware of this. The majority. Yes, there is a significant portion who own homes, right? And who have enough retirement income. Sure, they're still not rich. Can we just figure it the fuck out as a society? No, we can't. Because propaganda works, folks. Propaganda, I'm talking about garden variety propaganda. So when somebody says you will own nothing and you will be happy, and they think they're being sarcastic or telling a joke, that's garden variety propaganda, and they are repeating. They've been propagandized. They don't know they've been propagandized, and they're repeating the propaganda. And I want to tell you what propaganda is. And again, Krishnamurti would say, well, this is not a problem as long as the individual understands that they've been propagandized and that every time they say it, because I just said it, I need to understand that I'm spreading propaganda, which in this system of things, propaganda doesn't even really have a meaning. It's the meaning of the word propaganda has actually just become obsolete because the system itself, it just operates at a basic level of propaganda now. That's just woven into the tapestry, just like feminism. It's woven into the tapestry. See, it says dated. Noun, propaganda, as a neutral word, dated. Agitation, publicity, public communication aimed at influencing an audience and furthering an agenda. That's propaganda. And because of how advertising functions, it's absolutely accepted and fully fucking normal, y'all. It's not a negative. It says neutral. Yeah, it could be negative, or it could be positive, or it could be neutral. It's neither here nor there. It's what is. So it's, again, status quo, social contract, and conformity to peer groups while always reconciling with the phenomenon of propaganda. While somebody my age grew up with Cold War propaganda around, well, we got to beat those Ruskies because they're a bunch of liars and propagandists. But over here in America, we tell the people the truth, and we give them the freedom to think for themselves, and then they get to elect so-called leaders, right? And what does that do? It's a powerful symbol, and it's a lie to the people. It's a lie that implies that, well, now we love you as the government, and we would never propagandize you, because that's what the Russians do, and they're evil. And it's Rocky motherfucking Four, Jack. Sylvester Stallone, it's Rocky versus Drago. And then when the movie starts, the two fists come up, and one is the U.S. flag, and one is the fucking red with the yellow hammer and sickle, and they slowly rotate towards each other, and then they smash against each other. And then in the end, Rocky is victorious, and that's all anybody needs to know. And I saw it in the theater, of course, because I'm a fancy boy. The theater. And now Gen Z's making videos about Pulp Fiction being dated, right? Tarantino's Pulp Fiction, because Gen Z can't recognize that, while simultaneously they argue with me in the YouTube comments, and because they think that they want to grow up and be college freshmen in 1993, 1994. Well, me and my girlfriend, with her Playboy bunny body, 36, 24, 36, Jack, when we went to the movies on a Friday night, because old Benton is a bit of a fancy boy, artsy fartsy, he knew to go see Pulp Fiction, which had no buzz in Arkansas. I'm actually shocked that it was even showing in Fayetteville. It probably only showed in Fayetteville and Little Rock, most likely. Maybe Jonesboro, probably not. Because that's close enough to Memphis. Just drive your ass to Memphis, partner. And we went and saw Pulp Fiction. There was no buzz. Nobody knew about it. There wasn't. And see, Gen Z will never be able to relate to. I didn't have a smartphone and access to my peer groups where I got to say, hey, y'all, I just went and saw this movie that you probably haven't heard of. It's called Pulp Fiction. Check it out. It's badass. Because I would have been some version of an influencer. And my memory is that nobody gave a flying fuck about it where I lived in Arkansas until it came out on VHS. By then, enough buzz had built. But now I'm looking at Gen Z making videos about Pulp Fiction, and then they think they understood the culture of the time well enough to comment on it. No, you don't, Gen Z. And I know we don't have Gen Z listeners, and it's not a criticism of Gen Z, who I have a lot of regard for, and I do empathize with their plight, or compassion towards them. But to blame it on boomers is to be a tool of the system through propaganda, right? And psyops. And these, what's the good of understanding that there's propaganda and psyops only to fall victim to the psyop? That it's not your fault, little Gen Z, because boomers already fattened themselves up and took all the resources and left you with nothing. Well, I don't know. How did my father graduate high school in 1973, and then by 1983 it was the worst job market in the history of this country, post depression. To this day, the worst job market in America, 1983. Adjusted for inflation, peak of gas prices at the pump, 1980, the year he opened his gas station. $1.25 in 1980. Punch that into your inflation calculator. Higher than it is now. It's higher than that in Arkansas in 1980, adjusted for inflation, is higher than gasoline is in Los Angeles right now. But people have no concept of that. They cannot conceptualize that. It's not my problem. And why can't they conceptualize it? Because the system is not going to package that idea and send it to them via push notification. But Benton, critically thinking for himself, understands these things, and Benton has a memory. See? So when people romanticize the past, whether they lived through it or not, they live through it and they're forgetting all the stuff that sucked, such as no such thing as credit cards when the Federal Reserve cranks the rate up to 20% to get runaway inflation in check. You think it's anybody who's not at least experiencing relative affluence had a motherfucking credit card in 1979? Are you crazy? Not without collateral. What do you think you're going to get a home loan without strong ties to the community and a secure job? Well, yeah. Were there secure jobs available and ties to the community? Yeah. Were there a whole bunch of poor folks who had no hope whatsoever of ever getting blessed into that system? Absolutely. And in fact, a lot of the documentaries that were made about those people are available on YouTube, and I've watched some of them recently. Oh, but it has to be their fault because they're layabouts and they're lazy. No, they were depressed and they were attempting to raise their children in slums in places like Chicago, right? Because the system needed poor folks who would work in the factories and such of the North. So the system found out ways to drive them out of the deep South. And you had some of them living in tenements in Chicago saying, well, you know what? Yeah, I can make more money here in Chicago, but it doesn't go as far. And one of them said that their day-to-day life was better in Mississippi, in the poorest region of the country. They said, yeah, well, I was living better in Mississippi than this. This is fucking horrible. And then just getting shuttled from tenement to tenement to tenement. Because eventually the city tears the tenement down and builds something new in its place. So now they got to go live somewhere else. And at what point does the person just say, fuck it? Why bother? Oh, well, and now here comes the government to introduce all sorts of drugs. Oh, okay. And then there's the Vietnam War. Get a bunch of people hooked on heroin, bring them back over here, right? And like I said, all current social problems that are not directly related to technology were fully fomented in this country by 1960 at the latest, including urban decay / urban renewal / gentrification, right? And unaffordable housing, or, you know, housing that's unacceptable, right? And then everybody treats it like, well, look at this new shit. Oh my God, the system's collapsing. The system is maintained at a state of collapse, folks. That's its secret. It can't collapse. It's maintained within a state of collapse for the regular folks, while the rich people get richer every new moment into perpetuity. Did you know that Bill Gates is not even the richest former CEO of Microsoft? Think about that. Steve Ballmer's richer than Bill Gates. Bill Gates hired Steve Ballmer. Like, what even is this at a certain level? Steve Ballmer, who, as far as I can tell, only ever worked for other people or corporations, owns a motherfucking sports franchise. How's that possible? Well, he's serving evil, serving this system of things. You know, how much evil has been wrought by Microsoft, for fuck's sake? How great is that darkness? Right? So, what do you mean great? Well, look at the definition of the word great. It's in there. So when Kanye says Hitler was a great man, well, if you look at the definition of the term great, he ain't wrong. Doesn't mean we like the guy. And that, yeah, again, I'm going official fiction. We don't need to be told a bunch of things about Hitler. Thanks anyway. Important, consequential is one of the definitions of the word great. A person of major significance.
I don't. I really don't. How can you say that? Fucking fuckers right through your fucking whole time and hide. You know who said that? That guy over there.
Just waiting for the demonically oppressed to get out of earshot. He's ate up with them demons. Poor little feller. And then, to sort of bring the discourse full circle, how much of the gaslighting and you know, the discussion gets pointed towards Benton. It's like, well, what can we negate about Benton's discourse? Where can we find Benton to be wrong? You know, how can we pick at him? How can he be spiritually attacked? Right? Uh, maybe this weapon will prosper temporarily. It's like, I don't know, man. Or people could put that amount of effort into cleaning up their own houses. They could. Again, that the things that could be done now, right motherfucking now. And then I had a thought at 1 a.m. this morning making these notes. And again, to counter Kim's idea about, Benton can't possibly be autistic because he has a preconceived notion of what autism would manifest as. Meanwhile, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. But I was right. I wrote down numerous. Let me see. Maybe I can show this to the camera. This is what I was doing at 1 a.m. Copying down dictionary definitions into my notebook. Relegation. And I've been working with this. This idea, this word's been popping into my head a lot lately. Relegated or relegation. Relegation, noun, one, the act of being relegated. Well, that's not that helpful. So then, under that definition, I lettered them because it gets too complicated to try to write this down and number all these definitions. But underneath that first definition, you have A, B, and C, and A I omitted, but B, demotion in a hierarchy. For example, in business, well, business, then we can go ahead and tie that in with the vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions. And then we have demotion in a hierarchy. And if this system is, as Benton purports to be, that it exists in the nature in which I've described it, and it makes an enemy of what I am, well, would it not always seek to demote Benton's performance in the context of the hierarchy of business? And then C, demotion of status, etc. And then demon and demotion have the first four letters. That's interesting. So Benton, recognizing at a very early age, at something of an early age, that I'm what they call no count where I'm from, or of no account, or of no reputation. Kind of like Jesus, I suspect. Always calling himself Jesus or God again. That's what you say. Demotion of status, etc. So demotion, noun, an act of demoting, a lowering of rank or status. So if, again, I know what I am, but for the purposes of the discussion, in a thought experiment, if what I am is one with the most super intelligent power and force of love and creation possible at the highest levels of vibrational frequency, a quickening spirit, and if this realm exists as the antithesis of that assertion, and then this realm makes an enemy of what I am and what you may be, well, of course, the realm would use a strategy of seeking to demote Benton in status, uncovering and walking the perfected path within. Well, buddy, I hope you like doing that under what now? Oh, biblical persecution, where Christ himself said, the servant is not greater than the master. And if you think you're going to take up your cross and follow me, well, you've seen what they've done to me. What do you think they're going to do to you? And hell, they at least called me rabbi to some extent. Demotion of status. It's right there in the definition. I've been relegated. Relegation. I've been what I am through the delusion of individuation, that an indivisible force could be individuated. That process, my own nature, the what I am being used against me by antithesis on behalf of antithesis through the subversion of the creative force, that process has relegated me to a lack of success financially. Because it's not possible to be identified with what I am and also materially successful in this world. And that's where you get into all of this so-called prosperity preaching, right? Demotics. I didn't even know about this word. I just found this by accident, serendipitously. Demotics, noun, library cataloging, the area of knowledge relating to the care and culture of the people. Interesting. Sociology in the broadest sense. Demotic, that's pretty close to demonic. Adjective, of or for the common people. All right. Which I think also probably ties in with ideas of democracy, probably, or democratic. I'm just guessing, because a lot of these, I didn't write it all down, but a lot of this ended up being tied into ancient Rome. Oh, now, wait a minute. Ancient Rome, you mean Saul of Tarsus / air quotes the Apostle Paul, that Roman Secular J. Interesting. Persecutor of Christians, on his way to persecute Christians. When Lucifer came to him as a brilliant angel, perhaps impersonating Christ, or maybe that was just some version of Robert Johnson at the crossroads being made an offer within this vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions that always makes an offer to us in the now. Now it's here, now it's gone, now it's here, now it's gone. Would you like to opt into treating your blessing as if it might be a curse? And Saul of Tarsus was on his way to persecute Christians who were 100% standing in their blessing and bringing forth the manifested power and truth, right? In the name of the Lord Christ Jesus. See? Power in the name of the Lord Christ Jesus. And Saul of Tarsus was on his way to offer them to treat their blessing as if it were a curse right before they were tossed to the lions or whatever. Hey, one last chance. If you want to curse that blessing, we won't have to throw you into this lion's den. And then the mockery being the idea that, well, the Lord will protect you anyway. What are you worried about? Oh, look, another one got devoured by the lions. I guess they really, I guess that Christ really ain't what all he's cracked up to be. Ain't so great after all, is he? And that's the man who claimed a transformative experience of Christ and was ordained and given a commission by Christ, supposedly. That's the man that the government hired to do these activities in ancient Rome. Really? Oh, well, God will use anybody. I don't know, which God are you talking about? There's several in the Bible. Which one do you mean? Because old Saul would have negated himself and cut himself off from what I am just by his own performance. And that's the I never knew you. Right? That's the story of the book of Job. Well, hey, have you considered my servant Job? Because if he doesn't perform properly, well, and we never knew him in the first place, what's the difference? And would that not be the attitude of the most super intelligent power and force of love and creation? Tolerance, acceptance? Oh, well, no, because humans have been taught what love, tolerance, and acceptance are based on the backwards engineered and rationalized notions of the lack of love, because that's the only way antithesis can interface with the notion of love, because it can't ever experience love. That's what the love your enemies means. Meanwhile, what I am doesn't know how to do anything but that. Relegate, verb, exile, banish, remove, or send away. Such as to send away within delusion an individuated piece, as if that were even possible, of an indivisible force that is supreme authority, life itself, expansion, creation, love, tolerance, acceptance, power. Banish it to this place, to relegate it, to treat it as if it was the lowest of the low, as a slave relegated to this place, a corporate slave. A, transitive, done to a person, exile or banished to a particular place. Metaphorical lion's den, perhaps? B, reflexive, obsolete, rare, remove oneself to a distance from something or somewhere. See, that's the alchemization. That's the transcendence. The only way out is through. Benton, I did that to myself within delusion, within this place. I relegated myself to the lowest levels and then alchemized that to eventually have the baptism in the Holy Spirit, and then to come unto true knowledge of self, the unlocking of the achievement within the world of death and the game of lies. Interesting. Was there a C? I guess C didn't pertain. I got a, B, and a D. D, transitive, figuratively, remove or send to a place far away. Because folks probably feel cut off. Is this why they've bought this Christian notion of worshiping something outside of themselves? Because they've been removed or sent to a place far away from what may very well lie within them, the kingdom of God, and God is love, according to the Bible, air quotes, so-called God is love, and the kingdom of air quotes, so-called God is within you. So to be relegated or sent, removed or sent to a place far away from one's own nature, meaning into this vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions where all meaning is to be sought externally and all power is to be sought externally in service of corporations and businesses and a never-ending series of business transactions. Are you crazy? Well, yeah, not you, the listener, but sure. Definition 2, consign or assign, relegate. A, consign. So that's what I did. I consigned or assigned myself a particular mission for a particular purpose. Because if it's one thing, so the slave can only be relegated. Supreme power and authority and the source of all can relegate itself. See how that works? Power over the power, Mr. Miyagi, if you're listening. When Mr. Miyagi said, "Oh, well, didn't Jesus give you power over Satan and the demons?" No, sir. Read your own quoted scripture again. Was it Luke 10:19 or 10:9? I don't remember exactly. It was somewhere in there. Power over the power, sir. Not power over Satan and demons. Power over the power. Power over the power that could seemingly relegate what I am to this realm. Seemingly within delusion. Only based through a subversion of my own creative force that never lies dormant and always brings something new into existence. No matter what. Well, see, what I am always has power over the power, meaning, yes, can this place, can the individuated delusory Benton and illusory Benton within these various layers of delusion be relegated? Sure. But the greater power, the power over the power, is that Benton can relegate himself to homelessness and the low levels of society, so-called, and alchemize and transcend and use that as a method and a means to overcome and, in fact, to assist the process of the Comforter, which is the Holy Ghost, teaching me all things and bringing unto my remembrance. Woo-wee! This is some powerful preaching. Best believe. Don't believe, experience. Do the damn thing. A, consign a person or a thing to a place, position, or role of obscurity. Benton, you no count. You're homeless. You won't pull yourself up by your external bootstraps. Look at him. He's not being productive today. See, he's been relegated to a role, a place, a position, or a role of obscurity, insignificance, oblivion, lower rank, or especially inferiority. He's getting what he deserves from the perspective of Mr. Miyagi. Because the master that Mr. Miyagi serves wants to see Benton in this condition. Right? And meanwhile, doesn't even realize, oh yeah, alchemizing it and using it for a greater purpose that antithesis doesn't know anything about. Greater purpose. Huh? What do you mean, greater purpose? Power over the power, sir. Defeated Mr. Miyagi by what he thought represented the defeat of my own assertions. And yeah, I felt some type of way about it and thought, well, you know what? I really don't want to get into a fucking Bible debate with this bozo because he wants a Bible debate, and now it's going to be a never-ending series of legal battles using the fucking scripture. Not interested, not my wheelhouse. But then I actually was like, well, probably ought to go actually read the scripture a couple of times. Oh, power over the power. Fucking idiot. Excuse my language. My apologies. I'm rarely, if ever, a name caller, but it does slip out at times. B, assign a thing to an appropriate place or situation based on appraisal or classification. That's exactly what Benton did to get to where Benton is right now. And well, yeah, in this system of things that only measures in money, we'll say, how's that working out for you? Well, it's working out great for me. 3, transitive, refer or submit. Almost as if I was relegated to this in an ordainment. right? Which also means to foreordain when Christ talks about in John uh, that you didn't choose me, I chose you and ordained you, right? Which would be to refer or submit, right? And what's the paperwork and legalese on that? Was there some sort of Akashic records or whatever you want to call it? Is there a file somewhere that says, hey, this is old Benton and he's set apart to air quote so-called God? The paperwork has been submitted. The Lord Christ Jesus made his referral, not an appointment, Mr. Miyagi, a referral and an ordainment. You wax that on. Refer a point of contention to an authority in deference to the judgment thereof. Refer a point of contention to an authority in deference to the judgment thereof. B, submit something to someone else for appropriate action thereby. Compare with the meaning of the term delegate, which I had already been thinking about that. But I actually didn't write down anything from delegate, I don't think. And now C, now rare, submit or refer someone to someone or something else for some reason or purpose. Again, in a context, an ordainment or to foreordain, right? As distinct from appoint. In Mr. Miyagi's own attempt to muddy the waters recently in the comments. Anyway, now it's time to meditate within the energy sphere because some of that, as I'm sure some of you detected because some of you left, being not of strong constitution. And, I don't know who's listening these days, but if there were any younger folks, because they, unfortunately, most of them grew up in the context of placating mommy's emotions, they really don't have a very high tolerance for especially a male who's expressing annoyance through the voice, right? In fact, ex-wife number 2 basically had no ability to tolerate these sorts of diatribes and lectures, mostly based on a tone of voice and an energy. So now Benton, in seeking to further master his own emotions, right, is utilizing this to clear and heal, to further clear and heal these stagnated energies within the energy sphere and the physical tissues. So some of this, actually, what you're hearing in my voice and detecting energetically is in fact some of this, these low-level stagnated gross energies seeking their exit. And they must be experienced. So bear with me while I experience them. And then how much of humanity is tied up in doing anything whatsoever that's necessary to avoid experiencing such negative states. And I say bring it on. And in fact, as I'm saying these words, I'm having an experience of my own spine, my consciousness directed towards my own spine, and recognizing that while observing the breathing meditatively, that there's been a great deal until recently of gross stagnated energies surrounding the spine that's now no longer there, and that this is in fact some of the ever increasing sensitivity to all of these energies, right? And yeah, I understand that, except for some lovely ladies who kicked down a total of $45 yesterday, and because they have lives. And again, this is not to impugn the listeners. I'm glad there's people that listen at this early in the morning, but they don't necessarily, they're not around listening live. And I went live later in the day yesterday, and 2 of the 3 lovely ladies present in the chat donated to the cause. And who initially supported Christ's uh, fledgling ministry in the Bible? Mary Magdalene, or Magdalene, however we say that. All right, it's the ladies, but then men falsely believe that, well, it's women want a rich man. Well, what do you think wealth is? You think wealth is only money? That's dead. Money's dead. Money traces its origins to this realm. It's dead. That's not the only form of wealth. What I am is the highest wealth possible. Not Benton, not the performer, not the performance. What Benton is. That is the highest wealth. And if you think these ladies can't see it, you're fooling yourself. And if you think the ladies won't support that, you're crazy, because yes, they will. Now, Benton ain't going to leech off of them, and Benton ain't going to use them in that way. What I am wouldn't be capable of that anyway, but, you know, surprise, surprise. Now, the manipulative side of the dead flesh will certainly is probably already manipulating in some way to try to, you know, maybe incentivize or cajole people into donating. If you want to, go for it. You know, I accept donations. Oh, we'll probably finish up on truck driving. What time is it? Oh, it's Sunday. I don't really have to go anywhere and do anything. My grocery store's closed. 6:25, but we got time. I got time. I got time today. Is that what they say? Anyway, quick break. We'll be right back. Yeah, so today is officially 30 days off the cannabis. So I've been looking at truck driving jobs, and it's not looking good, folks. I'm not saying that I can't get hired, but I'm noticing that the only jobs that it looks like I might be willing to work, none of them have the driver's pulse link, which is where all my work history is kept and all of this. And you know, historically, I've gotten all my jobs by applying through that, and you know, I meet the qualifications of what these companies want, uh, but and I found at least a couple of jobs that look fairly somewhat attractive for, you know, again, a nightmare industry with unacceptable working conditions. That's every company, and there's no such thing as a good trucking company. And I'm talking long haul dry van, 53-foot dry van long haul. There's no such thing as a good company. We pick our poison. Hang on, let me get a little water. I tend to neglect myself during these streams, so I need some water. In fact, I realize I never even properly rinsed my mouth out after the egg drink, so now I'm neglecting my dental health. I might have to have another round of dark chocolate. That's one of the things your donations buy, is which is a powerful nootropic, theobromine, 100% dark chocolate, cocoa or cacao, whatever the fuck they call it. And then a lot of these jobs, the more fly by night, and they almost always have the driver's pulse. And remember, I want to do a 1099 so I don't have to pay the taxes. And so I'm seeing a lot of W-2 jobs where you got to, you know, go to their website, or you got to call or text the recruiter, and you know, shenanigans. But the companies that have the dedicated, so the way trucking is now for long haul, the companies that have the contract dedicated freight, they can be a little more picky. And with who they hire. And I got to be honest, I'm just not, and I don't have to be honest, but I know myself, I guess is really the way to say it. And you know, I'm just simply the chances of Benton jumping through a bunch of hoops to get mistreated anyway, because that's just built into the industry. You know, I in some ways I would rather just take my chances, and if the job doesn't suit me, I'm going to quit after a couple of months anyway. And that's the same with the companies that seem more attractive. Well, you know, I might not be able to stay in that place for longer than 2 months either. Like, do I really want to put all the time and effort into trying to sort of pick and choose through the jobs? You know, you're probably not. Um, so I don't know, man. It's not looking good as far as, which I'm okay with it, but it's starting to look not even doable. Now, last year I went back to work in March. Although I have to say, with my weighing about 140 pounds, and then some of my, I still have some of these issues, these health issues, and I froze my fucking ass off last winter, and you know that is one of the motivators to possibly get in a truck. But what good is it if I don't even make it through the winter? And it's not because of the driving; it would be because of the job itself. You know. Or I guess I could wait till deeper into the winter. But remember, I'm almost out of money, and I know the audience just is not big enough or capable of supporting me, and nor should it. I mean, let's just say what it is. That wouldn't be appropriate anyway. And I am good at living on not a lot, right? And I'm good at sort of leveraging my resources. And I don't just immediately spend whatever money I come across. Uh, so I got a little money coming in on the 7th. Um, and I bought food ahead of time to make it through till then. Or, I made sure I have access to money. Also, in conjunction with what I've got left from the last time I worked. And, donations also at times. And if people want to give, but they say, well, we don't use Cash App or Venmo. Amazon gift cards, you can email me the code, and you can buy them at brick and mortar, Walgreens, CVS, I think Dollar General, lots of places, pretty much anywhere but like Walmart, and maybe some other retailers, but a lot of places have them. And again, it's not necessary, it's not required. Economically, a lot of people are like, yeah, I got channels I would love to donate to. I'm not able to, you know, at this point. And then I'm looking at, I got 6 months left on my phone plan because I prepaid for a year of service. Um, and at what point? Because most of my homelessness, I had no phone service. I had a phone that I always had a phone, and I would use it on Wi-Fi for just downloading things. Mostly podcasts back then. I would download a bunch of podcasts and just listen to my phone all day. But at this point, it's probably a good thing if I didn't have a phone or phone service. But you know, either way, it's going to work itself out. But and maybe could still. I'm thinking about it, but I won't know till it happens. But eventually, just living like Jesus. But is that even possible in 2025? But no job, no tax liability, and no handling of money, which I think that would be the trickiest. Would be the no handling of money, because Christ had he had people for that. It's like, yeah, I don't. Unless I guess people could order things on Amazon and send them to various Amazon counters at Whole Foods and Amazon lockers, I suppose. If this thing ever got big enough, which I doubt it would, but that's fine. And part of that is just, in the modern, there's really not a lot of teamwork. I'm expected to do everything, you know. without assistance, or hire people to do it, which, whatever. But and it's not by way of complaint, it's just I'm the one who's able to do certain things that don't really seem to be, on display other places. Um, and then, it's sort of the idea of it's just sort of not appreciated in its own time. Even like Van Gogh, you know, not even really able to sell his artwork at the time. And I fully expect, NPC normie and just regular old the zeitgeist will catch up to a lot of these ideas, especially with these AI Jesuses now. Have y'all seen there's AI Jesuses? There's various like AI Jesus chatbots, and then Peter Thiel won't shut the fuck up about the Antichrist and all this. Meanwhile, while he's, you know, his own organizations are, you know, furthering what would be described as Antichrist. They always do. They always do what they accuse. It doesn't even matter. But I think you know what I mean. Hidden in plain sight, as it were. Right. And yeah, ever grateful for the growth. My path is progress. Grateful for these opportunities. We're hitting the chilliest part of the day. It's about 7 a.m. here. I think it's like 58, maybe, which in Arkansas wouldn't feel cold at all. It actually feels a little cold here, and um, I've held off on buying because I don't have all my winter clothes with me that I had last winter because it's just really realistically there's not room in the car, you know, with truck driving and then moving out of a truck and then you know don't have my computer equipment. There's a whole bunch of stuff I had in the hotel room that I bought that I got rid of. Dropped it off in Denver because old Tom wouldn't take it. If anybody knows who Tom is, even stuff that he said that he could sell on Craigslist, he didn't want it, which is fine. I don't care. I just left it on the sidewalk near his apartment, not like outside of his apartment, like down the street. Because it's like, man, I can't. It's just I didn't have the room for it, and you know, it's just more things for people to potentially, you know, want to try to steal. So less is more in that regard. And yeah, it's nice to have a car to sleep in, and it's quite useful. I don't drive it. I don't know if people know that. I don't drive this thing around LA. It stays parked. I only move it I fired it up once every 3 weeks to charge the battery up, and to move the gas through the fuel system. Because when they say gas goes bad, it really doesn't. What happens is the gas that's like in the fucking fuel lines and the fuel pump or whatever goes bad. So starting it up, running it for 30 to 45 minutes, charge the battery, all that. And occasionally they make me move it to another parking spot when they put the signs up and say no parking for a couple of days. And recently I went to Whole Foods and I took my bigger backpack and I put my smaller backpack inside of it. And then, because I was picking up 15 pounds of apricots, then if you factor in what the backpacks weigh, and I think I carried like a liter and a half of water. And, I talked about I was a lot bigger and stronger. I had a lot more muscle mass and physical strength back when I used to do 10 miles a foot per day with 35 pounds minimum in a ruck sack. And just coming back with no more than 25 pounds, probably closer to around 22. I won't say it kicked my ass, but it was just like, it reminded me, I don't want to do this. I've lost the desire to hike around. I love hiking, but I've lost the desire to hump any amount of weight really whatsoever. So yeah, I know I'm capable of getting rid of the car and then hiking around. It's just, I've lost the desire to do that. It's like, am I really going to start eating a bunch of food? And, I can go back into training and regain enough strength and put off, put a. It would take me a little while, but yeah, I could put on another 10 pounds of muscle if I needed to, whatever. Um, and I could just make myself do it even without the increased strength or muscle mass. But yeah, I don't want to. It's like, yeah, you're sounding like a hypocrite here, Benton. Yeah, show me a human, I'll show you a hypocrite. I burned out on it. I've done so much of it, I fucking burned out on it. It's no longer appealing to me. And I'm getting older, I'm good most of the time, but I'm finding I have to stretch my calves now, or I get Achilles heel pain. And then I was walking around earlier, and just for no reason, my ankle started hurting. Like, oh, that's great. But an adjustment to the gait fixed it. Am I being lampooned in the comments? A little mystified at the only 6 likes. You people have high standards apparently. But thanks, Christos. I am powered by compliments. And thanks to the chat. Thanks for not turning this. No, I don't mean Christos, just generally. Thank y'all for not turning this into Sunday morning truther chat room. So I do appreciate y'all. It might just be a happy accident, but thanks for that. And where's my hat? But yeah, back to the winter clothes. I had some nice wool socks. So I think it's funny how it's inflation and prices are skyrocketing, but I can still get, and they're not 100% real wool, but it's a wool and a synthetic blend. They're good quality. I can get 4 pairs of warm socks for like $20. So and some of this stuff I left in my truck. I had a couple of nice thick hoodies that I left in the truck. So at a certain point, it's like, yo, I'm moved out of the truck into the car, and it's like I can't just, I can't just put everything in. It's just too much at a certain point. Something's got to give. And one of them was a RuPaul hoodie, which I don't carry, but it's like at a certain point, it's like that's not really appropriate. It was a really thick, like brand new hoodie, which was nice. So I left that behind, and then the other one was a pretty nice hoodie, but it was like a cannabis dispensary, and which I don't care. It's neither here nor there, but I prefer plain clothing if possible. So what have we got? 3 hoodies. I think I got a total of 3 hoodies. Um, I probably need another pair of pants because the pants I have are good, but I can't really wear. We get into the layers, and some of this stuff needs to be bigger, where it layers properly. I think I'm good on bedding. I got the 2. Although I forgot. See, you remember what you forget. I always wanted to. Last winter, I was like, damn, man, Walmart sells those El Cheapo fleece blankets, and I've never found anything on Amazon that looked like it would fit the bill. And I just never remembered. I should have picked up a couple of fleece blankets at Walmart. Those they're like $4, $5. I don't know what they cost these days. But I got a couple of wool blankets. I bought a sleeping bag and a bivy sack just in case I end up sleeping outside. A proper bivy. And when I still had money to spend freely, I was trying to figure out what could I actually buy and fit in the car and not use until winter, but still be able to have room for it. Maybe another set of thermal underwear. I have one set, but I think I ditched. Well, I think eventually my second set of bottoms tore up, and I think the shirt never quite fit. I bought a too small of a shirt, or it shrank or something, or probably I got a little bigger. Most likely is what happened. Because if folks don't remember, I was 120 pounds pretty much the whole time I was in LA last year, and now I'm more closer to 140. that says anything about how ill I've been. So anyway, if folks feel like donating to that, go for it. If not, um, there's always a way. I'm trying to think. I guess that's probably about it, but who knows? Let me see. Let me see. Oh, look, I got one more like out of them. And I choose not to identify as tired or fatigued, but um, hell, I slept until no, wait a minute. When I slept until 3:30 yesterday, which I almost always wake up right around 2:20, 2:30, somewhere in there. Um, in my sleep, my wake up has transitioned a lot, and I noticed lately I've been having these dreams, and it probably has to do with a lot of the healing that's been happening, and I'm really getting into these tissues, and I've been doing way more stretching, thoracic spine type stretching, and really getting deep into the area underneath my shoulder blade. Whatever needs to be experienced, emotionally and energetically, some of that's coming out in the dreams. And I had a dream after I woke up and wrote down the notes and the definitions and all of that we covered. Managed to go back to sleep for a short time and had some dreams. And it's really not necessarily getting into the specifics, but I could tell it had to do with just processing certain fears that had probably been repressed, and some further healing of that, which was really good. Now it's my job to make sure it doesn't return. So I guess if we had StreamYard, we would see if. Oh, I think you know what? Today or tomorrow, is probably my StreamYard 20. At least my 20 hours probably comes back. So I don't know. We might do some one-on-ones, perhaps, if I can find anybody willing that I can also tolerate. We'll see how that goes. Oh man, yeah, I'm stretching right now. It's good stuff. Anyway, I guess I'm gone. Bye.